It's always nice to begin a course like this with a brief account of the evolution of how this all came about. So we think about this great quotation: "You don't need to be considered just the best of the best. You want to be considered the only one who does what you do." That's pretty wise information from the wonderful Jerry Garcia, rest his soul. He hit it right on the head. The difference between trying to compete in a parody world and actually separating yourself is really being known for what you do. The evolution of brand goes back, way back to 2700 BC. Ancient Egyptians introduced the idea of branding or burning a mark onto livestock to identify ownership. And the modern day cowboy, if you will, carried that through, and we see a lore around the idea of brand. We are moving from tactical to strategic in the year we are presently living. It's a primary brand building goal to build, enhance, or leverage brand equity. And we do that through major dimensions of the brand, such as awareness, how many people know about it, the associations that the brand carries in the minds of its users and consumers, and the loyalty of the customer base. Most firms recognize the need to have a unique look and feel. Way back in 1901, good old Heinz said it's beans, and notice the Z on the end of beans is even spelled differently. Needed to have a look and feel, and it eventually evolved over time. And that Heinz logo became much more distinctive. To stand out, the brand needed to be differentiated from others. It chose ketchup in 1960 to kind of be the marker, the identity of the Heinz brand. And a distinctive logo carried through the day, still does today, and it brought this slogan to life: "It's slow good." Product differentiation about the viscosity of its ketchup. So when we think about brands, we think about time, here's an interesting scheme of Dove. Yeah, a simple bar of soap. And over the course of time, Dove has been able to innovate to keep itself alive. Way back in 1950, it really defined the Dove beauty bar. And as the years proceeded, as the 30, 40 years since then proceeded, it innovated with things like milder soap and leading brand recommended by physicians and these kinds of copy points that really mattered. The chart represents the development of brand over 8 decades. Each time you see the dotted line, see that little dotted line there? Indicates that Dove marketers needed to re-energize the brand to ignite growth. But the innovation that occurs in the 50s is quite different than the innovation that occurs beginning in 2000, when it moves from the measures that are purely tactical, short-term, and sales-driven to being strategic. Strategic to the sense that the move from a refined Dove beauty bar up to 2007, when they introduced the Dove Real Beauty campaign, entirely different kind of an appeal. Dove, over time, has innovated to remain relevant in the eyes of its target customer by moving from simply better for my skin to better for my psyche. The Dove case is one that we will dive into in week 6 and try to understand more about how that works. But I want you to remind you of something here. And if I say the word safe, what do you think of? Well, many of you might say Volvo, because they've kind of earned that reputation. If I said driving, what would you think of? BMW. What about magical? Yes, Mickey, Disney, the whole magical crew. What about overnight? That's FedEx, unquestionably. And then there's this strange one that you may not be aware of, but it's something called irreverent. And one of the key markers or values of the brand Virgin is irreverent. In other words, it stands as a fighter for you, as a fighter for the common man. When people associate a word with your brand, you own that word, and that it becomes a very strong association. And the associations are important because what I present to you right now is what we will call basically the consumer journey. It begins over there with that trigger at about 9 o'clock, and the customer considers an initial set of considerations for product or brand choice. And an active valuation goes through. We see at 3 o'clock, the moment of purchase. And there's all kinds of wonderful things that go on here. We'll talk about this in much greater detail later. And the kinds of activities that people go through to adopt or understand a product and eventually buy into a brand are really fairly well prescribed and quite different than they were 20 years ago. One of the reasons for that is pretty clear. We are sitting in a world where, man, everything is different. Everything is different. For example, when you think about this young lady and trying to make a decision, she's got all the power in her hands. You know, economists use this term perfect competition to describe a state in which the exchange where all the value goes to the buyer. In other words, competition is neutralized and price becomes the only arbiter in the decision to buy a particular product. When does this exist? When many sellers, no barriers to entry. When the customers have perfect knowledge, she knows everything about everything if she just chooses to. And when products are basically homogeneous. Many sellers, no buyers. We talked about that in the first video. And we understand that these three things are at operation. That is, she is absolutely flooded with communication. She has two-way, asymmetric, and symmetric information coming and going. She has information at the palm. She can understand a car review. She can understand a restaurant review. She knows, essentially, she can go find out what she should pay for a used car and be within shouting distance and really be in a leveraged negotiating position. Finally, when it comes down to the purchase, it can be instantaneous. We actually can conduct this while we're waiting at a red light. No, I don't advise you to use your cell phone while you're in the car. Think about this, folks. Parody is parody. This was in 2015. That's Taylor Swift. And that's an outfit that actually she wore, was photographed, and minutes later, that particular outfit was claimed to be something that Nasty Gal put out, because there it is. And sales just blew up. They sold out in hours. Fact is, that wasn't a Nasty Gal outfit. That was actually a Balmain outfit. Not $86, but closer to $2,000. So Nasty Gal is confused. We're all confused. We are confused about value and how do we do that. And a lot of it hinges on brand. It helps us understand. Think about this situation with regard to parity. And I faced this a long time when I was at Conagra. We'd have great products. We'd enter the market with a great deal of energy and force and investment. And along would come the local guy that we sold to, like Kroger, and they would basically palm the market away from us. Here is Vic on the left, Kroger on the right. Hard to tell when you're walking down the aisle which is which or what does what. And the result is that your customer is actually palming off your name and taking profit away from you. We call that who's who in the zoo because sometimes it is very confusing. Managing brand requires, on one side, bold actions to accelerate differentiation, while mitigating often as a result of losing control. To summarize, we focus on brand equity. We expand from brands to brand families, and remember that brands are assets that must be developed, utilized, and protected. It's a mouthful. We'll continue to dig into this topic and try to understand how brands are managed and how we actually can leverage a competitive advantage. Thank you very much. Look forward to the next one on Brands Are Assets.